So what we're saying is sci-fi is different, but the same.
Hello, welcome back to another video. We have another rant for you today, except today's video should be a more productive rant.
Yeah, if you saw our romantasy video, Erin and I had some strong feelings about where the romantasy genre is headed. So today we thought we would focus in on a different genre, one that's been kind of drawing us in lately.
Yeah, I think like on the back of that romantasy video, we started talking about what we have been gravitating towards. And the answer was kind of surprising. It seems that we are both now into sci-fi. I will admit that I have been particularly fascinated by space recently.
I find this hilarious.
It's become like a strange obsession where I will spend a ridiculous amount of time like Googling space and looking at like pictures from the James Webb telescope. So that has probably influenced the decision to have this video today.
Right before we filmed, I was telling Erin I don't think I can name all the planets.
I know. That's embarrassing.
Yeah,
okay?
It's bad.
The lines between sci-fi and fantasy, I think, have always been blurry. Both genres use similar elements. I think a lot of times it comes down to readers' personal preferences, what they consider each genre to be.
Definitely. It's more of a spectrum than a hard line between the two genres. Despite that, I do think growing up, I've always been strictly a fantasy girly and
agree.
really never delved into more of the sci-fi side of the genre. It's definitely a new thing for me.
Do you kind of also feel like sci-fi was a boy thing?
Yes, that's a great point.
Yeah.
That's probably the reason growing up that I didn't read sci-fi.
Me too. I mean, like fantasy felt way more accessible or something that was like open to us. And even that, sometimes it was hard for like the epic fantasies.
Very
but
true.
Sci-fi felt way too
It just felt like
boyish. Yeah.
Clearly for boys.
Which is ridiculous now.
So silly.
So how do we define sci-fi?
So I think that the main difference is that sci-fi worlds are our world, or possibly a different timeline version of our world, but still set within the realm of possibility.
Normally they will include something like space, time travel, aliens, science, AI, technology, and I put in like infections or like contagions as like a sci-fi thing as
environmental warfare.
Yes. So I think like that's kind of our sphere of sci-fi.
And like we said, it's a spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, like when we started looking into the definitions of each or what people consider to be the definitions, it was really fascinating to see that a lot of it comes down literally just to the vocab. Like what vocabulary the author uses can basically decide if it's a fantasy or a sci-fi book.
There was a meme trending on Twitter a little while ago where people were writing fantasy is when blank, sci-fi is when blank. We'll pop a few of our favorites on the screen.
I thought these were hilarious. Like, and it is
so
true. I feel like both of these genres is basically there's an impossible thing. And if it's defined by science, then it's considered a sci-fi. And if it's like explained or defined by magic, it's considered fantasy.
We do want to add, we are not claiming to be science fiction genre experts. We have not read I wouldn't even say we've read most of the most popular science fiction books.
No.
This is new to us. We are just getting into it, just dipping our toes in, so to speak. But we're loving it so far. We will show you on screen some of the sci-fi books that we've read recently.
Yeah, just so you can get an idea of like what we're talking about. I feel like 2 or 3 years ago, we both read an Emily St. John Mandel book and fell in love.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of like
launched it.
Yeah, started us because that was so different for me. I'd never read anything like that and loved it. And I do think maybe that like started our
Me too.
Slow burn.
I do think that kicked things off.
Yeah.
There is a subgenre of fantasy that I think sits kind of in the middle of sci-fi and strictly fantasy, and that's magical realism.
Yes.
Because magical realism is set in our world or one very like it. But I do still see it as a separate thing. It's not even true fantasy to me because magical realism is meant to feel like the real world. And oftentimes the magical elements are sort of up for debate.
Yeah.
It's like a hint of magic to the point where you're not really sure if what just happened is magical.
You've always loved that genre.
I love magical realism. There's something like that slight eeriness to it that I really get into. And the world building in magical realism is so accessible because it is just a touch of the impossible or improbable, you know?
Yeah.
My absolute favorite magical realism book is definitely Kafka on the Shore by Haruki
Of course.
Murakami.
Yes.
Excellent. So good.
Let's cut it off there, or else we're getting to a...
Yeah, we'll have a whole nother video on our hands.
Okay, so now I thought we would just go through a couple of bullet points of what we've been loving about this genre. And maybe if you are usually a fantasy reader like us and have been having a couple of issues, maybe similar to us, maybe these will convince you to give sci-fi a try.
And I'm really hoping that you'll have some recs for us that you can leave in the comments so we can continue to get into sci-fi, especially once you know really what's been appealing to us about the genre.
Yes, please. So I think the first thing that I have been absolutely loving is this element of what if. I love how sci-fi kind of like leaves it open to something that could maybe theoretically happen to us in real life. I love this quote from Rod Serling, who narrated and I think produced the show The Twilight Zone. And he said, "Fantasy is the impossible made probable. Science fiction is the improbable made possible." And that like really sums it up. I love how it takes these things that technically could happen and brings them to life.
Yeah, it makes the stakes feel higher.
Yeah.
And it can give you a sense of gravity because it's more relatable.
Yes. I mean, like, aliens probably do exist, okay?
Controversial.
Whereas I'm not convinced that there's ever going to be dragons. Like, I'm sorry. It gives this, like, relatable element to it that I miss a lot of times in fantasy.
It makes you think, what would I do?
Yes. Usually, even in these books, I'm still like, yeah, I would die immediately.
Station 11 made me want to start like stockpiling fresh water
Yeah.
and antibiotics.
Get your bunker or whatever. Yeah. When I read Chain Gang All-Stars, which is set in like a futuristic America, what was so appealing about it was that I kept thinking, like, what would I do in this future America? Like, how would I react differently or the same to these characters? Because this is a possibility in the future. And it was so interesting to do that throughout the book. It did. It really made it like so fun.
It really puts you there.
Yes. It's more emotional too, you know?
True. I think another thing that is really pulling us into sci-fi is that it's just a nice change of pace. As you can tell from our slightly unhinged rant in the romantasy video, we're getting bored of the same old tropes. Your shadow daddies, the dragon riders, the sassy main character. We're kind of over it. We want something a little different. And that's what sci-fi is bringing to us.
And it's not to say that sci-fi is not oversaturated. It probably is, but not to us.
Right.
We have not gotten to that point. I do feel like all of these fantasy worlds have so many similar elements. And the thing about sci-fi is the genre feels a bit bigger. I mean, you're talking about some that are like in space, some that are, the one I'm reading right now is about like deep sea exploration and things like under the sea.
That's a good one.
They're all different enough that it feels very exciting.
It's funny because you would think it would be the opposite because with fantasy, it's wide open.
Yeah.
But it's almost like having the limitations of it needing to be science-based kind of allows for more creativity.
For sure.
Don't get me wrong, I'm sure sci-fi is just as formulaic.
Yeah.
But it's a new formula to us.
But like on the other side of the coin, it does still feel familiar. So it's not like super uncomfortable, you know, like we still feel safe a little bit. We know kind of what to expect, but just like we're looking at it through a new lens.
It's not our current reality. There's still an element of escapism that we love from fantasy.
Just in a different way.
Yeah. So what we're saying is sci-fi is different, but the same. I think one thing that makes it feel familiar still is that you have these classic archetypes like the hero's journey. You know, Star Wars is such a classic example of a textbook hero's journey. And we see it in fantasy so often. And then having that same structure in the sci-fi books gives it a sense of we kind of know where the story is going.
Although I will say, I think that that might relate mostly to the series because you've been reading
True.
more sci-fi series. And that's not even a lot, but you have been reading
Yeah.
more. Whereas, like, for some reason, I've been reading more standalones. And these sci-fi ones, while being familiar in a way, also, like, break the mold because they're not a series and they're supposed to be kind of weird. And so the structure is different. Like an Emily St. John Mandel book, the structure is different than anything I've ever read.
She's a perfect example. I mean, she breaks all the molds.
She does. And so, like, it feels safe, but it also feels different.
You still have your hero to root for. Even in Emily St. John Mandel and others super creative, you still have somebody to root for, and you still have a villain you can hate. Sometimes the villain
sometimes it's the deep sea or an alien, but you're right. And it's almost more scary because it's usually like super unknown and like you don't understand it. Whereas like we all understood what Amarantha was up to.
Yeah, like that riddle. Come on. Okay, and our next point, this kind of goes along with that what if thing that we like. It's that sci-fi gives us a chance to confront our fears and sort of that existential dread that I think we all feel from time to time.
Especially lately.
When we see science fiction or fictional characters in general confronting real world threats like nuclear war, pandemics, climate change, that sort of thing, it gives us a chance to kind of safely confront those fears and see how it plays out. We get to see characters and societies confronting these problems and see how they deal with it. And it gives us a chance to consider that we might find a way to deal with it if and when these things happen to us.
It might be a false sense of security, but it kind of makes you feel like, okay, well, I've considered this possibility. I know what I would do in this situation. And that is comforting, especially when things feel really uncertain in real life. It feels comforting to be able to play these out on the page and in your head so you feel like prepared, even if it's not really true.
In Octavia E. Butler's work, the Lilith's Brood series, it's a first contact story. And there are so many terrifying possibilities when you consider first contact.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that she doesn't give us this like on a platter, everything turned out fine. She definitely explores some of the ways that it could go down poorly. But she also shows how humanity can still survive even in the worst possible circumstances. It's the most creative alien story I've ever read.
That's so beautiful. And I do think that one of the things that we end up liking about these is that it kind of shows the strength and like positivity of humanity. That's kind of like,
there's a hopeful note.
Yeah.
The innate sense of humanity that carries through all of us.
Yeah.
That's a comforting thought. We need that.
Yeah.
We're feeling very introspective this week.
This is existential. So we do have a few notes for sci-fi as a genre from our limited experience.
Things we're looking for, things we want to see more of.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about like what we're looking for more.
I'm sure these things are out there, so tell us what to read.
Yes.
I'm looking for some female protagonists personally. I have read a lot of sci-fi with female protagonists, but it seems like it's not the norm. Now that I'm reading Leviathan Wakes, there's two main characters. They're both boys. I like them, but I would love a girl main character.
Yeah, that makes sense. To be fair, I think every sci-fi book I have read has a female protagonist.
We have a type.
But I would like to see some more of these like space opera type series with like female protagonists. Next, dare I say, could we get a little romance in this genre, please? A little more romance.
I haven't seen much of it at all in what I've read.
Again, I've read a lot of sapphic sci-fi, which I was not aware of until right now. And they are beautiful stories of love. But I do miss that like straight up
the slow burn
butterflies romance of it all.
Yeah, the chemistry, seeing them get together.
And it's definitely possible in this genre, and it must be out there. But that is something I am missing a little bit that I'd like to see.
Very true. When I was reading How to Lose the Time War, which is a love story, I definitely noticed that I was missing the more classic
Yeah.
watch them fall in love. It plays out over love letters between the two of them, which is great. I love the letters, and it definitely hit me emotionally. And I want them to kiss.
Yeah. They
Yeah.
didn't kiss?
No.
Yeah, like we don't need spice, but like it's gotta be. Do you want spice?
I mean, I wouldn't mind spice, but I want a little something.
Now, for all of you who are gonna go recommend some like alien
I didn't even think of that.
books, that's not specifically what we are looking for. But honestly, maybe I'll just give it a try. Maybe I will. Like, maybe I should.
Maybe you'll realize this is what you've been looking for all along.
Maybe.
I want the slow burn. That's my favorite type of romance.
There's got to be these books where, seriously,
I just
they're
want to
in
inject
space.
Yeah.
They're on a spaceship or
Right.
something. The
Close
force
proximity.
I mean, like, it's all there. Yeah.
I want Emily Henry banter
Yes.
in space.
Yes. Okay. That's what we're looking for. Okay. And our last sort of request is very specific to us. And we understand our perhaps shortcomings, considering Elena didn't even know what the 8 planets in our solar system are. But sometimes we need a little more dumbed down world building.
Yes. I need a chapter in the back that has a drawing, preferably, a diagram.
Yes.
And can explain to me some of the science. Didn't you say the science in The Martian was a little intense?
Yes. And I think that is generally considered to be like just part of it. The science was insane. And I did get used to it, but I had never felt more dumb in my life.
Yeah.
Never. And I do think maybe if some of the science in some of these was dumbed down a little or overly explained, it would make the genre feel a little more approachable.
Right. To attract new readers.
Exactly.
We're trying to help you, sci-fi.
And we will learn. You just gotta like give us a few extra breadcrumbs, please.
Everyone watching is like, we can name the planets. All right. So those were some of our thoughts on sci-fi, what is appealing to us, where we'd like to see the genre go.
Yeah, it's been really fun to kind of just explore a new genre. We still are, I think we would both still consider ourselves to be fantasy people.
Yep.
When it's all said and done.
And the numbers back that up.
That's true. But, I mean, like, it has been super fun to explore this genre. We definitely want to see more. We want to hear your thoughts. Tell us what we should be reading. Let us know if we have convinced you to give sci-fi a try.
And leave us some recommendations in the comments. Like this video if you liked it.
And subscribe if you haven't already. And until our next video, we will see you later.
See you soon.